Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome. We are going to be addressing a topic: what happens when giants invest in blockchain. To start us off, I'm going to introduce my esteemed panelists. I'll give them a quick claim to fame, and then we'll launch directly into the discussion. So, on my left, I have Lisa Lambert, Chief Technology and Innovation Officer, National Grid, founder and president of National Grid Partners. Her claim to fame is managing $1 billion global software and services fund with over 80 companies, and founder of a $125 million Intel Capital Diversity Fund. She's also the #1 Rising Star Award recipient by GCV's 10,000 members and founder, CEO of Upward. Next to her, I have Dale Christie, business fellow and blockchain strategist for FedEx. Dale's claim to fame is the chairman of the Blockchain in Transport Alliance Standards Council, BITA for short, and led the first proof of concept at FedEx using blockchain technology. To his left, I have Emmanuel Fombu, Head of Global Commercial Strategy and Digital Innovation at Johnson & Johnson. Emmanuel's claim to fame is that he's a healthcare futurist turned Silicon Valley entrepreneur and winner of the 2017 Boldest Digital Health Influencer Award from New York City Health Business Leaders, and has recently just published his first book entitled Future of Healthcare, based around blockchain and AI. To his left, I have Amna Al-Reda, Accelerator Manager, Innovation Division, Emirates Airlines. Now, her claim to fame is ensuring Emirates Airlines is at the forefront of innovation by integrating startups into the corporate ecosystem. And finally, a good friend of mine, Mr. Saeed Al-Damaki, co-founder and managing director of Alphabet Digital Currency Fund and an advisory board member of MENA FinTech Association. Saeed's claim to fame is that he's the co-founder of Alphabet Digital Currency Fund, an advisor to over 15 blockchain companies, not just in the region, but globally too. So, thank you and welcome everybody. So, without further ado, we'll go straight into our first question, and I'd like to start with Lisa. Could you please give us a brief overview of what you're looking at, your approach to blockchain investment, and what issues you are trying to resolve with blockchain?
Sure, happy to do that. So National Grid, for those that don't know, is a regulated utility. We're based in the UK and also in the Northeast of the US. And so, in general, for those that aren't familiar with how energy companies work and how regulated energy companies work, we are very conservative. We're not looking to bring on peer-to-peer energy trading at a rapid pace. Our focus around blockchain is helping us to do customer better. I think most folks that have utilities would say that they don't necessarily shine when it comes to customer experience or customer service. And so one of the things that we're trying to do is give our customers more choice, give our customers better service, give our customers more control. And we believe blockchain is a way of delivering that, but it really is the basics for us. We are looking at billing and settlement blockchain use cases. We are looking at supply chain visibility use cases. We are looking at cyber infrastructure at the sensor, at the meter for us. So there are a number of companies and projects that we're working on in all of those areas. Rewatt Power is a settlement example. Expansive is a supply chain example. They help us to identify methane gas leaks in our pipeline. And Filament Networks is an example of a cybersecurity infrastructure company based on the blockchain that sits at the meter. So those are some of the things that we're evaluating, and our approach is to deliver value for our customer, deliver value in our enterprise, lower costs, lower risk, rather than trying to usher in kind of energy trading on a peer-to-peer basis.
Fantastic, thank you. Dale, if I could ask the same of you, please, if you give us a brief overview of your approach to blockchain investment and what issues you are looking to resolve.
Sure. From a FedEx point of view, obviously we're a global transportation company. We go to 200 countries. We look at that literally at a global level. So it's not an individual knocking on doors basis. When you kind of go up into the International Space Station and take a look at that, it gets you to a different view from that point of view. I would tell you, we kind of jokingly refer to blockchain as boring and useless. It's a database. We've got a lot of them. Most of them are faster. Most of them are more scalable. Most of them are more mature. It really doesn't do a lot of things very well, but what it does, we think it does very well. And so we think around authenticity, where authenticity matters, whether that is in global clearance, whether that is in aerospace, aircraft parts, whether that's in healthcare, pharma, medical devices, those types of things. We think it's very interesting, and so we're trying to narrow that down. We're not trying to sprinkle it on everything just to see what's going on. We're trying to really focus those efforts there.
So essentially you're looking for problems to solve rather than solve problems that don't exist at present.
Correct, and again, back to the claim to fame comment that you made, we were trying to solve a business case at the time as part of a quality team, and in an actual dispute resolution scenario, and we were kind of talking past each other. We were using different languages, and blockchain allowed us to create a common data language and a secure chain of custody of that information. And at that point, it really kind of came into focus for us, but it also showed us how that could scale globally within our company.
Fantastic, thank you. If I could ask the same of Emmanuel, if you could give a brief overview of what you're looking at and your approach to blockchain investment and the issues you're trying to resolve.
Sure. At Johnson & Johnson, we manufacture drugs and devices. And so for us, we look at blockchain from two main perspectives. One of them is around the idea of counterfeit drugs, right? So like in the US especially right now, the drugs are very expensive. People go online, people buy drugs from Canada or from anywhere else around the world. So blockchain provides a great way for us to actually track drugs to actually make the consumer to be confident that the drug they actually buy actually came from the original manufacturing site and is not a fake drug. That's one side of it. The second piece of where we look at it is around research. Clearly, we are in a very heavily regulated environment. Research is part of what we do day to day. And so we are very interested in like genomic companies, especially like 23andMe, other genomic companies that are coming on board, because blockchain provides an opportunity for the consumer to actually store your data in one central point, right? And we could then basically go straight to the consumer and bypass going through hospitals and other regulatory bodies to actually say, hey, we are looking for people that have certain information that we might need. Are you open to actually volunteering that information for research? Or get compensated for that, right? So that's a very new industry that is growing, so we're looking at it from those two perspectives.
Fantastic, thank you. And can we just confirm your book's on the same topic?
Adam?
Your book is on the same topic?
Correct, yes. Yes, my book is called, thanks for asking that, right? You're a good marketer. It's called The Future of Healthcare, about humans and machines powered for better outcomes. Yep, it's on the same topic. Right.
Fantastic, thank you. Amna, could you give a brief overview of what you're looking at and the issues you're trying to resolve too, please?
Of course. So from Emirates Airlines perspective, and I'm assuming everyone hopefully knows what Emirates Airline is, we look at blockchain from all different angles. So I work with startups to see how we can integrate their blockchain technology into the corporate world. This cohort, we have a couple of different focuses. First of all, we're looking at passenger security, right, and safety. And how can blockchain protect the integrity of the data that we receive? We had a session on this yesterday, actually, whereby we were asking, if a passenger inputs the incorrect data today, right? If you're booking a flight and you put in the wrong name, we don't actually know until you arrive to the airport. And at that point, it becomes too late because there's only one option there. Please go home and rebook a new ticket, right? Whereas blockchain can really help us to ensure that that data is verified, that we are receiving the correct information, that we can also protect your data. We're also exploring blockchain from a procurement perspective. Within airline, we have a massive procurement arm. So how can we explore blockchain-focused technologies to really transform our current processes? And like I always say, it's a playing field. So we're just exploring all of our different options based on the biggest pain points. Thank you.
Fantastic, thank you. And finally, Saeed, could you let us know, please, what is your approach to blockchain investment and the issues you're trying to resolve? Now, I think I know some of the answers because I'm familiar with your work, but please let our audience know too.
Sure. So it's mainly two main areas that we're looking at. One is the actively traded cryptocurrencies that are on the market and existing. The other side of it is startup blockchain companies that are up and coming, that want to raise capital and have a product or an idea, and they want to get it out in mass adoption. With the actively traded cryptocurrencies, we're looking at liquidity, volumes traded, the usual trading, technical analysis. With startup blockchain companies, we go through a professional approach of researching these companies, looking at the teams, speaking to the teams, looking at what the product is, if they have an MVP or what their roadmap is, and if they look likely to deliver on what promises they make. So ultimately our aim is to generate returns for our investors. So we can do that by either actively trading. As you know, the blockchain cryptocurrency markets are very volatile. There's a lot of currencies being traded, so there's a lot of opportunities to generate alpha. And then there's so many startup companies out there that want to raise capital, and
It was developed to.
but there's a lot of companies that, you know, most of them actually, they just want to raise capital just for the sake of raising capital. They don't have a proper plan on what they're going to do with business strategy, business plan. So we try to filter out as many of those companies. So from what the deal flow that we see, we take away 90% of what comes to us, and the rest of the 10% we do due diligence and proper research and make sure that we are getting to quality projects and companies.
Fantastic, thank you. Now, you didn't mention there that you're doing quite a lot of work with AI. Do you want to just add a little bit to that? I think some of the things you're doing with regards to community work, not just with crypto, but blockchain adoption and using the AI concept to ensure that people are having the right discussions with the right people in the right places. I think that's key to growth, education, understanding in the industry as well. So I don't know if you want to just add a couple of lines to that.
Yeah, so I've got a community, a crypto community that I've started a couple of years ago, mainly on the messenger apps. We utilize AI bot, which utilizes AI and machine learning to, facilitate and administer those groups. There's many groups along many different focus areas, such as security tokens, law and regulation. So we're looking at AI, machine learning and it's still very much being developed at the moment, such as the case with most of the blockchain technologies out there.
Fantastic, thank you. Right, if I now move on to the next question. I think this will probably lead to some shorter answers. What are you looking for when assessing where and what to invest in? Again, I will start with Lisa, if I may, please.
Yeah, well, I think I do innovation and investing at National Grid Partners, and blockchain, whether it's a blockchain company or whether it's an AI company or a security company, you look for pretty much the same types of things, right? You look for great teams, you look for a differentiated product which has IP that's defensible, you look for a product market fit, you look for the ability to scale, you look for some revenue traction. So those are the things that you should be looking for as a professional investor.
Having a business insider. Very high risk.
Okay. and so, our strategy doesn't change whether we're looking for blockchain or other types of technology. I think the things that you would look for when you're thinking about blockchain are the ability to deliver on the security promise. Utilities view blockchain as the equivalent of security, right? Being able to lock down data at the meter, being able to deliver a platform whereby consumers could trade energy, right? You need trust, you need reliability, you need predictability. That's kind of how we look at blockchain technologies, but I think technologies in general and how we invest in them really doesn't vary depending upon the category.
Fantastic, thank you, Dale. Same question to you. What are you looking at when assessing where and what to invest in?
Well, we've been on the cutting edge of technology since we started in the 70s, and essentially invented the chain of custody with not only the air freight industry, but within the chain of custody within that industry. And so on the front end of the internet, on the front end of every technology since that time, so it's only natural that that's just part of what we do. As I mentioned a few moments ago, we've looked around. You kind of put your blockchain glasses on and look all around the room, and for the last several years people have been envisioning that all kinds of wonderful things were these amazing promised land, the pot of gold is out there, and so we've really had to kind of fight against that and really kind of stay focused on what business opportunities are there and how can we continue to support and provide value to our customers. And so that has narrowed that focus to some of the areas that I previously mentioned around where I would say authenticity, provenance, pedigree. Those become very interesting to us, and especially in a global supply chain basis.
Fantastic. So I think selective with who you work with and how you work with them. And I think that's something that we all need to understand when we're looking at blockchain products and projects, that not every project or product is going to work for everyone. So thank you. Emmanuel, what do you look at when assessing what to invest in on the blockchain side as well?
Right, so for us, we're looking at two main things. One is around the question around data ownership. There's a company called Humanity.co that is actually fighting for the 31st human right, which is the right to data ownership, right? So there's a whole tagline from My31. So from a healthcare perspective, we're very interested in that movement to actually help drive about that change. And so we will look for companies that support that whole idea behind data ownership and advocating for it and the future of that. So we're big into that. We're also looking at companies that are able to solve a problem that we have in healthcare called that of interoperability, which basically means how do you pull data from wearable devices, right, like the Fitbit, the Apple Watch, and how do you connect that with electronic health records from the hospital, and how could you keep that secure? So we are definitely interested around those areas.
Fantastic, thank you. Amna, what are you looking for when making investments and where to invest?
Yeah, so from my perspective, and I can focus mostly on startups, is that we look at things that would make sense to the business. And back to the point that you made earlier, it really has to make sense to the business. In the case that blockchain is fantastic and it's interesting, but not every single problem can be solved with blockchain. And there's a massive hype on blockchain, which is fantastic. But we need to understand what does that really mean when it comes to solving solutions, because we won't really understand the impact until 5, 10, 15 years down. And blockchain really taps into the most sensitive data, passenger data, protection, airline. And so when we come to look at where to invest, it needs to touch based on the business. And does it really make sense to make that investment there? What are the outcomes? Can we actually measure them? So that's, yeah.
Perfect, thank you. Saeed, what are you looking for when assessing where and what to invest in on the blockchain front?
So there's a lot of opportunities globally. So our reach is global. We get a lot of projects that approach us looking for investment. Mainly what we're looking for is that there is a use case for the blockchain technology that these companies are, claiming to use. So if there is going to be use case, especially when it comes to tokens, then the more the token is used, the more there'll be demand for it, so the more likely that the price will go up, so the more likely you'll generate a return. So I think the most use case out there at the moment, I think, is mainly financial services. Banking has been disrupted, as you can see. Supply chain management, keeping record of, land registry, for example. There's a lot of use cases out there, possibly also exchanges where, cryptocurrencies are traded. That's a use case for companies as well out there. So anything that we feel has a good use case and good potential, we'll definitely look closer at.
Fantastic, thank you. Back to Lisa to start with again. I think that's the prescribed manner now. What differentiates the winners from the losers? Now, I think it's very hard to say because it's certainly in a nascent stage, but what do you see when you're working with counterparts as the sort of USP or the standout things that you are looking for to work with someone to make them into a winner?
Well, there's me as the investor. Obviously, as an investor, you want to be sure that it's a product that can monetize itself. I think that's one of the things that blockchain has been criticized of, that it's great technology, but it's not a great business model. And so as an investor, I want to make sure that the company can actually monetize the business. We haven't actually invested directly in blockchain technology. We've largely invested in solutions that could deploy blockchain in a way that enhances their product. So for example, we invested in a DERS marketplace company called Leap. And so Leap is a marketplace, and therefore trust is required in a marketplace, in exchange, commerce. And so blockchain would enhance the delivery of that product, but Leap doesn't require it to do what it does. So it can monetize whether blockchain technology becomes a reality and at scale or not. So that's the kind of assets that we're looking to invest in. I think you want to make sure that you can make a return, and blockchain is still very early, very nascent in the monetization side of things.
Dale, for you, what differentiates the winners from the losers? Well, I say losers, again, I don't think there is necessarily losers at this stage, but please tell us the USPs and what you're looking at.
I'm going to answer it as a former strategy officer. I'm going to answer it from a strategy point of view. There are a lot of people that would listen to the comments that I made a few minutes ago and he said it's not very fast, it's not very scalable, it's not very mature, it's not very good, it's certainly not as good as a lot of other databases. And they would conclude from that they would sit on the sidelines and say, let me just sit back and watch where this goes. It's too early, it's too risky, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that would be a mistake. I think this is the moment to do exactly what we're all doing. We're talking about it. Learn, read his book. I get no commission off of that, but read his book. There's other books out there, Blockchain Revolution by Don Tapscott. There's lots of good material out there to learn. And I would embrace that at the C-suite level. Use cases are very interesting. C-suite needs to understand, how will this affect my CFO, my CIO, my chief legal officer, et cetera, and bring your expertise around the C-suite, and then add the blockchain logic and knowledge to that and perspective. And then if you want to sit on the sidelines, then do so strategically, but don't sit on the sidelines passively. And I think that's going to separate the winners from the losers personally.
Thank you. Emmanuel.
From my perspective, I think, especially around healthcare, it's fascinating the number of people that are working on blockchain. And when you actually speak to 90% of them, you find that they're all consultants. No one's actually doing anything around blockchain. So that's a difficult piece. So for me, I think the winner will be is a group of people or the team that actually has a vision and has the expertise that could actually build the technology and make it secure and actually scale. Right, that's very important for us. We're not interested in just doing little pilot studies and then be done with it, right? But to make that happen, so we are very interested also. One of the key things we look for before making an investment is actually who's involved in the management of these companies, right? Who's actually involved, what's their background, and do they have a track record of doing this, and what their long-term visions are. Thank you.
Amna.
Yeah. So from our perspective as an airline, competition is continuously hitting us from all different angles. The world is getting more connected each second. And when we look at what makes a company a winner or loser, it's two words: incremental or disruptive. When we look at innovation, it can't be something that's as basic as a system upgrade, or it's going to eliminate this manual process. It needs to be 10 times ahead of where we are today, but also where our competitors are. So we look for companies that really, tapping on your points, have that vision, but a very futuristic vision where they've studied the industry, they've studied our competitors, and they completely mind mapped where we need to be in the next 5, 10, 15 years.
Thank you. Said.
Yeah, I think a clear strategy is very important. And I think the second piece is executing on that strategy as well. If you have a team that's had the experience of starting up a company and then a successful exit, and they've learned from a lot of mistakes they've made in the past, then they're more likely to deliver on their promises. So I think the winners are the teams or people behind the product that actually execute. And you don't have to have a really fancy idea. You can have a simple idea, but as long as you follow the strategy and you make the best of it, then you'll eventually get there. But If it's a very complicated idea and you're poorly executing it, then you're not really going to get anywhere. So I think that's the main thing for me.
Perfect, thank you. Now, we found out what separates winners from prospective losers, but what does the panel expect to happen after investments have been made? Now, again, I'll start with Lisa. Lisa, please.
Yeah, so we have a dual mandate. We do investing, but we expect to get a strategic return for those investments as well as a financial return. And so whenever we invest in a company, we look for a business unit sponsor that has to be aligned with a strategic priority, and we expect to deploy that technology. So I'll give you an example. We have an investment in a company called AutoGrid, and they are a predictive analytics solution for DERs, for distributed energy resources. And so they are managing 400 megawatts of solar for us, demand response resource for us. They're managing across our gas business, our residential business, our storage business. They are saving us cost. They are saving us time to market. And we're getting a 15% ROI on that investment. So that's an equity investment that is producing strategic value to our jurisdictions in New York and Rhode Island and Massachusetts that is a quantifiable strategic return. So we expect to, after the investment, be able to get some real value that's measurable to our operating business.
Thank you. Dale?
One more time on the question, please.
What do you expect after investments are made?
What do we expect? What?
After investments are made.
I think ours is a slightly different approach. Certainly, I can't disagree with anything that she just said. Again, we're looking at this at a global supply chain level. We think there's a lot of players. It's not as easy in our case to hunt for a specific company that's doing a specific thing. And so part of what we're focusing on, I think we're going to get to that in a moment, in the Blockchain and Transport Alliance, we're spending a lot of time sitting at the same table working on standards development, various things like that. That's maybe a slow burn approach to that from that point of view, but certainly we believe that we have to have that foundation to move this thing forward. So it's a slightly different approach than I think maybe some of the other answers.
Thank you. Emmanuel.
Well, a lot of the companies we invest in, we're also customers of the business. So before we make an investment, we know this is a product we're going to use. So we could then, so if I am invested, I definitely know that there's a guaranteed cash flow to the company based on what we do. So we have a group of incubator spaces around the world called the J Labs. So we have J Labs in San Francisco, New York, Boston, Texas, London, Paris, and we continue to build these labs around. So when I find a company that we're interested in, we could incubate them, provide them office space, coach them, but knowing that the cash flow is coming there, we just help them expand in exchange for that.
Thank you. Amna.
Okay, so who's flown Emirates Airline? That's it, no? A good investment is making everyone whose hands is just up and hopefully more happy, right? Because our customers are our main focus. And so every investment that we make needs to lead to a positive outcome from that regards. And so just like Emmanuel mentioned, we also have different incubators, different accelerator programs, innovation programs, where we bring in the ideas and we marinate them and then we see what can come up with. That's not to say that every single investment is going to lead to a positive outcome, but like I always say, fail 100 times and then win once, and that one will be really good. So we focus on that. We discover and explore all the different ideas and initiatives to see what a good partnership would look like.
Thank you, Saeed.
For us, we have a short lockup period in our for our investors in our fund. So for the short term, we're mainly looking for liquidity from the companies that we invest in. But for the long term, we also follow and make sure that they're hitting their milestones, they're delivering on their roadmap, and they're just being proactive and communicating with us and being responsive to the market and just in general, following the strategy and just, reacting, and if they make mistakes, to learn from them and move on and get better as well. So I think short term and long, we have objectives short term and long term objectives as well. So we keep following all the companies that we invest in, and we just want them to reach out to us as well if they need any support or any advice.
Fantastic, thank you. Now, if we sort of move on to a slightly more granular level, How are you integrating startups into your corporate ecosystem to ensure access to innovation? Now, obviously, that is something that flows both ways. But if you could maybe tell us a little bit more, again, I'll start with Lisa, please.
Yeah, I mean, the example that I gave you on AutoGrid was, I think, a good example of how we're integrating the technology. We do look for strategic alignment for the investments that we make. And so in the area of blockchain, I mentioned earlier, customer choice, customer control, customer experience, those are the things that we care about. So billing and settlements and supply chain visibility and security at the meter, those are the types of functions that we're looking for. So when we make an investment in a company, we make sure that we have a business unit sponsor for it, and as we roll out the technology, that there is an owner that's delivering on the promise for the investment strategically.
Thank you. Dale?
From our point of view, and I think he mentioned it a few minutes ago, there are 1 million people that would love to knock on our door and say, let's do business, right? And the challenge is most of those ideas might be good ideas, but they just aren't scalable. And for a company, such as in our focus from that point of view, we have to really kind of narrow those things down. In terms of startups, I come from Memphis, Tennessee, and we are aligned with the University of Memphis and the FedEx Institute of Technology. We have a startup group there called Communitech, a number of blockchain startups there. We work with students. We're also part of an effort within the state of Tennessee in the U.S. That's focused on not only academics, so academia, government, and business, to make blockchain, kind of a bright light there and to encourage that effort there. So a lot of academic courses and smart contracts that people are creating smart contracts that help pay for tuition and various things like that. So we're involved with a lot of those kinds of things. We are involved with some startups, but again, they tend to be very selective.
Fantastic. Emmanuel?
Sure. So for us, we take an approach that innovation can come out from anywhere in the world, right? So I live in New York, but I'm not just solely based on innovation coming out of New York, right? So, and so what we do is for the JLabs, the interesting model is the company. We actually have some companies that come in that we don't invest cash, and we take zero equity and we actually host them, right? And the reason is we get them to spend time around Johnson & Johnson to actually understand what our business needs are. Because a lot of times people have solutions to problems you don't have, right? So I think being around, understand what the business needs are and having the right expertise in place, then we could have actually collaborate and actually have innovative solutions to our problems. So we actively engage in it.
Fantastic. Thank you. Amna?
So from our perspective, we have different programs. We have incubators and we also have accelerators. The reason being is that startups come at very different stages. You have very early startups who have just a simple idea, and then you have startups that can potentially scale. And they would come to us depending on their sizes to the relevant programs. And what's interesting is that we always come up with the mainframe of the challenge that we have, whether that's procurement or airport security, seamless passenger experience. And the startups end up coming with a lot more opportunities than we would envision. And that's the whole process of incubation and acceleration. And what we find out is that it's really interesting to actually bring them in and to connect them to the relevant departments, because you learn so much more than you would if you just simply outline a potential problem that you want the startups to solve.
Thank you. Saeed, please.
I think blockchain technology is rapidly evolving. So if you're a company in this area, you need to be in tune with the market. You need to be seeing what your competitors are doing. You need to be seeing what's happening out there with other companies. You can learn from other companies. You can learn from your competitors. You can learn from your investors. So I think innovation is a mixture of research, knowledge, and trying to be as efficient as possible. Because if you're not innovating, then that means you're doing things slower and more expensive than your competitors. So I think you need to be in touch with the market, and there's a lot of changes that are happening in the technology every day. There's something new coming up. So if you're not really following your competitors, following the market, listening to your customers, then you're not really going to innovate. So I think just keeping a sense of what's going on around you is important.
Fantastic, thank you. Now, I did have one more question. Unfortunately, we seem to have run out of time. So if I could say a big thank you to my panelists, Lisa, Dale, Emmanuel, Amna and Saeed, and have a round of applause for their thoughts and opinions for today.
Thank you.